Tim Walz is out there talking again.
You say he could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked their and they're scared of him because he could fix a truck. Like they're threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck. That's what he said. I'm like, do you? I bet you don't.
The lady doth protest too much.
I bet you don't.
I fear.
I bet if I bring a broken truck to you and a bag of tools, you're
saying that men he worked with in the National Guard in Nebraska went to the FBI because they believed he had given classified military secrets to the Chinese government.
They suspect that he did.
Suspected to the point that they went to the FBI.
And then China started producing almost a carbon copy of this military tank a couple of years later.
Come on. For real?
According to all of our research.
Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson just handed Minnesota Governor Tim Walz a brutal reality check, and it wasn't subtle. Rogan hit him with sharp sarcasm and cold-eyed disbelief, while Tucker dismantled his policies like he had a personal vendetta. From mishandling the pandemic to letting crime spike across the state, they painted Walz as the poster boy for failed leadership. If incompetence needed a spokesperson, this takedown just nominated one.
This video of Tim Walz doing the exact same thing.
Right.
Exact same thing. And he said, of course, it's a Nazi salute. He said that.
Right.
We spent 3 days debating, having them trying to debate that President Musk gave a Nazi salute. Of course he did. But that is a distraction.
This is how crazy things have gotten. Like,
it's coordinated.
So who is Tim Walz exactly? Most of us, I just want to say, I think he's should be investigated by the sex crimes unit. I really feel that way. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but he's one of the creepiest people I've ever seen. The vibe I get off that guy, I would not let him in my house. That's just my feeling. Maybe I'm being totally unfair.
Joe Rogan leaned back, arms crossed, that classic skeptical smirk settling in, as if someone had just tried to convince him tofu could replace steak. The topic? Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Rogan didn't hold back. He came in hot, a wrecking ball of sarcasm and facts, tearing into Walz's record like it personally offended him. This wasn't a casual critique, it was a full-throttle demolition of everything wrong with modern governance.
You know how gangster that is?
Yeah.
You shoot a guy in the face and the dude's like, yeah, I look like a bird. Don't worry about it.
I look like a deer. Is there any way to you that we're not being gaslit by Kamala Harris?
In what way?
Wasn't she a joke even among Democrats?
Rogan kicked things off by targeting Walz's chaotic pandemic policies. With a shake of his head and a chuckle, he compared Minnesota's lockdown rules to a bad sci-fi experiment. According to Rogan, Walz ran the state like a mad scientist, shutting down small businesses and schools while letting big chains thrive. He mocked the idea that liquor stores stayed open while gyms stayed closed, quipping that maybe Walz thought whiskey was a better cure than fresh air and a treadmill.
Wedding anniversary, they were married 5 years after Tiananmen Square, and he picked that date because it was a date that they would remember, he and his wife.
What?
Who does that?
Tiananmen Square?
Correct.
The tank crushing the lone protester? That's
their wedding anniversary. And they went to China for their honeymoon.
Come on. You're sure he picked the anniversary?
They've talked about this
in Tiananmen Square
interviews. Yeah, this is in newspapers.
But Tiananmen Square was a massacre of peaceful protesters.
I know.
Do you think they picked it to in the memory of those brave souls who died opposing the machine?
They haven't said that.
Oh my God!
Then came the mask mandates. Rogan rolled his eyes so hard you'd think he was trying to reboot his own brain. He described Walz as flipping through a COVID rulebook written by overcaffeinated Twitter activists and health bureaucrats who hadn't seen daylight since the Clinton administration. This wasn't science, Rogan argued, it was pandemic performance art. Walz played the lead role, and every Minnesotan was forced to act along as confused extras in a production called Panic Theater.
I mean, that much. If the people in Minnesota like it, who cares? It's just a star and some colors. The real problem is when you hear discussions of things that are openly Marxist philosophies, when you hear talk about equal outcomes and not just equal opportunity, but that we all need to arrive at the same place, equal outcome talk. There's only one way they can do that, and it's by forcing you.
Well, it's by everyone having nothing.
Yeah.
That's the only way to have things totally equal. Because you can't have everyone have everything. That's impossible.
Right. There's no way. There's not enough resources.
And then came the riots. Rogan didn't even sound mad, just stunned. The way Walz handled the George Floyd protests, and more crucially, the chaos that followed, left him blinking in disbelief. He tore in like a guy watching someone put out a fire with lighter fluid. Rogan described Minneapolis looking like the backdrop for a post-apocalyptic movie, while Walz stood by looking dazed, like he'd stumbled onto the set by accident. Entire neighborhoods burned while the governor's strategy boiled down to playing clueless and hoping no one noticed.
I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it.
First of all, kudos to CBS for allowing Governor Walz to quote Matthew 25:40 without interrupting him and saying, I'm sorry, that's an attempt at bringing in foreign disinformation campaigns. We can't accept that.
May those words burn on your tongue.
Right.
That's what
Rogan joked that Walz seemed to be auditioning for the slowest civil unrest response in U.S. history, like he was waiting for the flames to book an appointment. To Rogan, Walz didn't govern, he held pressers, crossed his fingers, and hoped the smoke would just politely disperse. When he pivoted to education, the gloves really came off. Rogan torched Walz's love affair with the teachers' unions, calling it less of a collaboration and more of a hostage situation. Schools were closed so long, kids needed a reintroduction to pencils. Meanwhile, union leaders were treated like high priests handing down commandments etched in stone. Public education, Rogan said, had become a slogan factory with zero substance. Then he turned to crime. Rising violence, carjackings, collapsing police morale, nothing was off limits. Minneapolis, under Walz, had turned into a city where Uber drivers needed danger pay and cops were treated more like suspects than law enforcement. Rogan imagined Walz sipping from a coffee mug that read, "Not my fault," while the city unraveled. Around him and entire neighborhoods locked their doors before noon.
Someone is going to inherit your soul. They don't want it bogged down with bad habits.
Right. Yeah, well, they don't want it to be evil. They
Right.
want it to have negative energy attached to it and the karma of killing a bunch of people.
Right.
Like, who wants Dick Cheney's soul? You know? The alien's like, you could have that dude.
Remember when he shot someone and then the guy apologized to him? Isn't that nuts?
You know how gangster that is?
Yeah.
You shoot a guy in the face and the dude's like, yeah, I look like a bird. Don't worry about it.
I look like a dude. Is there any way to you that we're not being gaslit like to hell by Kamala Harris?
In what way?
Then Rogan, in full stand-up mode with a bite, turned his sights on Walz's public persona. He said Walz looked like a man constantly bracing to apologize for things he barely understood, more substitute teacher than statesman. His whole vibe, Rogan joked, was like watching a nervous manager give a PowerPoint on fire safety while the office literally burns down behind him. And just when Rogan's sarcasm peaked, Tucker Carlson stepped in with surgical precision. No yelling, no drama, just that cold smile that said, "I'm about to peel your reputation apart, piece by piece." He opened with one word, weak. Tucker called Walz the blueprint for what happens when ideology overrides reality. According to him, Walz wasn't leading, he was managing vibes. Too scared to confront, too addicted to hollow slogans. He mistook indecision for compassion and thought stalling long enough counted as moral clarity.
I think it's fake. All of it.
Well, that Walz guy, I mean, I don't want to be too unfair because I don't know him and I don't have any hard evidence. He's a weirdo. That guy's weird.
He seems very
I'm
strange,
sorry.
yes.
There's something not right about that guy's personal life. So I hope I'm wrong because I don't want people like that with power. But most people I know with power in Washington have personal lives that would not withstand scrutiny.
Then Tucker dove straight into Walz's response to the George Floyd tragedy, not the grief, but the absence of leadership that followed. He didn't fault Walz for caring. He blasted him for vanishing when the people needed more than statements. While communities burned and citizens begged for guidance, Walz was busy issuing condolences instead of commands. Tucker said it felt like watching a ship's captain offer therapy while steering straight into an iceberg. Then came the real hammer, law and order. Minnesota, Tucker argued, had become a soft-on-crime experiment gone wrong, and Walz was the lead scientist. He painted a damning picture of a governor who let radical voices redefine justice, while ordinary citizens paid the cost. This wasn't policy failure, it was real families, ruined businesses, entire communities sacrificed to political cowardice. He ripped apart the myth of reform, mocked how police were treated like a tolerated nuisance, and accused Walz of hiding behind activist buzzwords while neighborhoods unraveled. And he wasn't done. Tucker moved on to the economy, describing Walz's tax policies as an instruction manual for driving people out of the state. Middle-class families, businesses, they weren't thriving, they were fleeing. Meanwhile, Walz hosted campaign rallies about economic justice like he was trying out for a Netflix special called How to Fail Upward. Tucker framed it all as one big delusion dressed up as progress, collapsing infrastructure, heavy regulations, and an exodus of sanity, all stamped with the Walz seal of approval.
With choosing the new flag and seal made its final selections this week, and the new design will debut next year. It follows 4 months of meetings, many spirited debates, and 2,500 submissions from the public sharing their ideas for the new symbols.
This is why they changed it, he said it was problematic.
Problematic. Oh, I love that term. Our current flag is problematic. I think we all know that. We've evolved into a more diverse state, and I think it's more reflective of that.
Then came the culture wars, and Tucker lit up like a man watching a circus act crash into City Hall. He mocked Walz for turning Minnesota into a testing ground for every half-baked progressive trend, turning schools into ideological battlegrounds and government offices into virtue-signaling hubs. Tucker didn't see a governor managing a diverse state, he saw a performer auditioning for clout with elites who equate disorder with bravery. He especially tore into Walz's pandemic hypocrisy, lockdowns for churches, but red carpet treatment for Hollywood rallies, small businesses shuttered, while peaceful protests were deemed sacred. It wasn't leadership, Tucker argued, it was narrative-first policy-making, where facts were bent to fit hashtags. He mocked Walz's tone, too, the calm, storytime delivery that sounded less like crisis leadership and more like he was reading Goodnight Moon to a terrified public. Tucker said Minnesotans didn't need a motivational speaker in a windbreaker. They needed someone who could lead through the fire, not offer breathing exercises beside it. And he ended with a brutal gut punch. Tim Walz, Tucker claimed, wasn't built for this moment. He was a man who had mastered sounding reflective while doing absolutely nothing. A guy who spent more time in consultation loops than confronting.